Have you ever felt like someone was trying to tell you something you just couldn't hear? Like a voice wrapped in silence, pulling at you from a place you hadn't yet dared to look. It was the kind of night that settles deep in your bones, November creeping in, damp and cold. Rain whispered against the window panes, blurring the streetlights outside into long golden streaks. The house smelled of worn wood and old memories, the kind that gather in corners where light doesn't quite reach. Claire sat at the edge of her faded armchair, knees pulled up close, the weight of another restless day pressing against her chest. The small apartment felt too quiet, too empty, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Outside, the wind carried the scent of wet leaves and distant fires burning in the neighborhood. Inside, everything was still, except for the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. She wasn't sure when she had started to feel like this, like the world was moving around her, but she was caught in place. A year had passed since the divorce, a year of quiet nights, of things unsaid, of mornings where she forced herself to get up, even though the heaviness clung like fog. She had packed away the photographs, muted the phone, closed herself inside this little cocoon of solitude. And then came the meowing. It started as a soft sound, almost a whisper from the hallway. At first, Claire thought it was a neighborhood cat caught outside in the cold, but the sound grew clearer, insistent, persistent. A thin, scratchy call that cut through the stillness and tugged at something she hadn't felt in months. The meows didn't stop, not for an hour, not for two. Finally, she stood, her bare feet cold on the wooden floor. She followed the sound through the narrow hall, past the chipped paint on the walls, past the little pile of unopened mail on the counter. The meowing led her deeper into the apartment, to the door at the end of the hallway she had never opened. The door was old, the paint cracked and faded like the rest of the apartment. It gave off a faint, musty smell, like a forgotten attic or a room locked tight for years. She hesitated, heart pounding, and then the meowing came again, louder, urgent, desperate. Claire reached for the doorknob and turned it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dim room filled with shadows and dust motes dancing in the weak light. It was colder here, quieter, except for the sound she had been following. A thin, black shape curled in the corner, eyes wide and gleaming. The cat looked up, as if relieved to see her. And in that moment, something inside Claire shifted. The loneliness she had wrapped around herself like armor cracked just enough for something new to slip through. Claire was a woman stitched together from fragments, a mother who had lost her child years ago, a daughter who still carried the weight of her mother's absence, a person trying to find her way back to herself after the world had tilted on its axis. The divorce was supposed to be a fresh start, but instead it felt like a full stop. The apartment was her refuge and her prison. That night, the rain tapping on the window sounded like a lullaby for the broken. The warmth from the radiator hummed faintly against her skin, a reminder that she was still alive, still here. The cat, thin, with a ragged patch on one ear and eyes that held a mix of fear and something almost hopeful, wasn't just an animal. It was a mirror, a quiet companion for the parts of herself she'd shoved away. The way it meowed, soft and persistent, was not just a call for food or shelter, it was a call to be seen. As Claire reached out a trembling hand, the cat didn't flee. Instead, it inched closer, pressing its cold, fragile body against her fingers. The sound it made was less meow now, more of a soft purr, fragile but steady. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the panes like a distant storm. Inside, in that hidden room, something long forgotten began to stir. She didn't know what would come next. The night stretched ahead, full of shadows and questions. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. The morning light filtered weakly through the threadbare curtains, casting long, pale stripes across the creaky wooden floor. Claire lay in bed, half listening to the city waking outside, cars idling, distant sirens. A child's muffled laughter carried faintly through the walls. But her mind was elsewhere, tangled in the threads of last night's discovery. The cat, her cat now, though she hadn't even given it a name, was already on patrol. She could hear its paws, soft and deliberate, padding across the floorboards, exploring the rooms she'd lived in for years, but never really looked at. The sound was oddly comforting, like a heartbeat pulsing in the quiet. Claire sat up slowly, her joints stiff from disuse. She watched the small shape slipping through the doorway, confident but cautious, a silent shadow darting from one patch of light to the next. It stopped at the kitchen, sniffed the air, and then let out a low, almost questioning meow. She moved toward the kitchen in slippers that felt like they'd forgotten the shape of her feet. The smell of stale coffee lingered in the air, mixed with the faint scent of rain-dampened earth drifting through the cracked window. Claire opened a can of cat food she'd found in the back of a cupboard, set it on the floor. The cat approached, nose twitching, then lowered its head and began to eat. Watching it, Claire felt a strange warmth, a flicker of something she hadn't expected. The cat was not just a stray, it was a presence, an acknowledgement that she wasn't entirely alone anymore. The cat's thin frame told of hardship, ribs pressing close beneath fur matted in places, but its eyes held an intelligent glow, cautious but not defeated. It was the kind of quiet company she needed. Over the next few days, Claire's routine settled into an odd rhythm shaped by the cat's presence. She named it Milo, after a half-remembered childhood friend, the name soft and easy on her tongue. Milo's behavior was subtle and complex, revealing itself slowly like the turning of pages in a book. He was wary, but not aloof. When Claire moved, he watched with wide, curious eyes, sometimes retreating to the safety of shadows, sometimes stepping closer until his soft fur brushed against her ankles. He pawed gently at her hand when she sat still long enough, his claws barely perceptible, an intimate gesture of trust. Milo's favorite spot quickly became the windowsill, where he would perch for hours, eyes fixed on the world outside. Leaves fluttering, birds darting, neighbors moving through their days. The way he blinked slowly, deliberately, as if sending silent messages, made Claire feel as though she was learning a new language, one spoken in quiet moments and gentle touches. One evening, as Claire was curled on the couch reading a book she hadn't finished in months, Milo climbed up beside her. His head rested lightly against her arm, his purr a deep, steady hum that vibrated through the quiet room. She absent-mindedly ran her fingers over his fur, feeling the rough patches where the matted fur had been clipped, the uneven scars beneath. Every touch was a thread weaving them closer. For Claire, it was more than just companionship. Milo was a mirror reflecting the parts of herself she'd been too afraid to face, the loneliness, the grief, the muted hope. Claire's days unfolded with an unspoken routine. She'd wake before dawn, long before the city stirred. The early morning was her sacred time, the few quiet hours when she felt she could breathe without the weight of memories pressing down. Milo was always there, waiting at the foot of the bed or perched silently by the window, his bright eyes catching the first hints of light. She'd pour a cup of black coffee, the bitter aroma filling the kitchen, and sit with him by the window, watching the sky change color. The cat's breathing was slow and steady, the soft rise and fall of his chest a calming rhythm. Sometimes, when the light hit just right, Claire could see the shimmer of dust motes swirling in the air between them, invisible threads connecting their worlds. At times, Milo would stare at her with a gaze so intense it felt almost human, an unspoken understanding, a silent acknowledgement of shared solitude. And in those moments, Claire felt something fragile begin to grow, a tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. But healing was never linear. One rainy afternoon, Claire sat on the floor in the living room, surrounded by the detritus of unpacked boxes and forgotten memories. The rain drummed against the window panes, a steady, hypnotic rhythm that blurred the edges of the day. Milo was restless, prowling from room to room with a nervous energy that hadn't been there before. His tail flicked sharply, ears pricked forward, eyes wide as he darted toward the hallway, then back again. Claire watched him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. He stopped suddenly at the threshold of the room she had found him in, the hidden room. The door was closed, the faint smell of dust and cold air seeping through the cracks. Milo's meows began again, soft, urgent, insistent. Claire knelt beside the door, placing her hand on the cool, chipped wood. There was something in the cat's behavior that unsettled her, a quiet insistence she couldn't ignore. She tried to open the door, but it was stuck fast, swollen from years of moisture. Milo pawed at the base, scratching gently, then meowed again as if encouraging her. Claire took a deep breath and pushed harder. The door creaked open just enough to slip inside. The room was small, cramped, filled with forgotten things, a broken chair, a stack of dusty books, an old trunk with rusted locks. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and thyme. Milo darted inside, weaving between the clutter, then stopped beside the trunk, pawing at its corner. Claire crouched down, brushing aside years of dust and cobwebs, her fingers trembling. She pried open the lid. Inside, she found a bundle of old letters, yellowed photographs, and a small wooden box carved with delicate patterns. Claire's heart quickened. The letters were fragile, the ink faded but still legible. She began to read. The letters told stories of love and loss, of secrets kept hidden in the folds of time. They were written by a woman named Evelyn, the apartment's previous owner, whose life had been marked by quiet sorrow and fierce resilience. Claire felt herself drawn into Evelyn's world, a life not unlike her own, filled with heartbreak and hope, grief and survival. Milo sat close by, his head resting on her knee as she turned each page with reverence. It was as if the cat had found a thread, a link to something Claire had lost long ago. And in that moment, the distance between past and present shrank. The next days passed in a blur of discovery. Claire found herself reading more letters, piecing together Evelyn's story, a tapestry of whispered dreams and hidden pain. Milo became her constant companion, his presence steady and comforting. He followed her from room to room, curling up beside the old trunk, watching her with eyes full of quiet understanding. Claire's own pain, once so sharp and isolating, began to soften. The apartment, once a cage, felt more like home. The cat's slow, deliberate blinks became invitations to trust. His gentle pawing at her hand, his quiet purring in the dark. each small act a step toward healing. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in soft amber light, Claire sat in the hidden room with Milo beside her. She closed the last letter and looked down at the cat. His eyes met hers, bright and clear. For the first time in a long time, she felt the tight knot inside her chest loosen. The meowing that had brought them together was no longer a plea or a call. It was a bridge. Between loneliness and connection, between loss and hope, between two souls quietly finding their way home. It was 2 weeks after Claire had discovered the hidden room, when the first crack appeared in the fragile peace she'd begun to build. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city washed and gleaming under a pale gray sky. The soft, early light sifted through the half-open window, bringing with it the scent of damp earth and distant smoke from a neighbor's fireplace. But inside the apartment, a quiet unease had begun to settle. Milo was acting strangely. At first it was subtle, a twitch of his tail, a low, almost imperceptible growl when Claire moved near the hallway. Then he started pacing, his movements sharp and deliberate, his eyes fixed on the far wall in the narrow corridor leading to the hidden room. Every night, without fail, Milo scratched at that same spot on the wall, the rhythm of his claws echoing faintly through the stillness like a whispered warning. Claire watched him from the doorway one evening, her chest tight. The sound of scratching filled the silence, a slow, persistent rasp that seemed to scrape at more than just plaster. She knelt beside him, running a hand down his spine, trying to calm the taut lines of his body. But Milo's gaze never wavered. His ears were pinned back, his tail flicking in irritation or fear. Then he meowed, not the gentle call that had drawn her in weeks ago, but a raw, urgent sound, as if he was trying to say something she couldn't yet understand. Claire's mind spun with questions. What was Milo trying to tell her? Was the cat afraid, protective? Or was there something in that wall, a secret, a presence, a memory, lurking just beneath the surface? The days that followed grew heavier with quiet tension. Milo refused to enter the hidden room now, the very space that had brought them together. Whenever Claire approached, he darted away, hiding under the couch or retreating to the windowsill, his eyes watching her with a wary, almost accusing look. Claire tried to make sense of it, but the more she observed, the more the patterns unsettled her. Milo's fixation on the wall, his sudden bursts of vocalization at odd hours, the way he seemed to freeze mid-step, staring into empty space, each behavior layered with meaning she couldn't decode. One night, as the city slept under a blanket of fog, Claire was jolted awake by a sharp, insistent meowing. It came from the hallway, the same call she'd heard the first night, but now darker, more urgent. She slipped out of bed, heart pounding, and found Milo at the threshold of the hidden room, his claws scrabbling at the wall, eyes wide and wild. Claire's fingers trembled as she reached for him. "Milo, what is it? What are you trying to show me?" He meowed again, pacing, then turned and stared at her, almost pleading. There was a vulnerability in his gaze, an unspoken plea for understanding that broke through the fog of Claire's confusion. The next day, Claire's thoughts churned like storm clouds. She was caught between disbelief and the flicker of something deeper. Curiosity tangled with unease. Why did Milo refuse the room now? Why did the wall seem to pull his attention so fiercely? That afternoon, she found herself tracing the surface of the wall Milo had been scratching. The plaster was rough beneath her fingertips, slightly damp in places, and the faintest outline of a seam or panel was barely visible under the chipped paint. Her fingers traced the edges again, then pressed harder, feeling for any weakness. Suddenly, a small section gave way. A loose piece of plaster crumbled in her hand, revealing a hollow space behind. Claire's breath caught. Could there be another hidden space? Something even more concealed? Milo sat nearby, watching, eyes gleaming with something almost triumphant. That night, Claire wrestled with a restless mind. She lay awake, listening to the house settling around her. The creaks, the sighs, the faint scratch of claws on plaster. Her thoughts drifted back to the letters from Evelyn, the woman whose past still seemed to haunt the walls. Had Evelyn hidden something? Was the apartment holding secrets Claire wasn't ready to face? Milo's presence was both a comfort and a reminder of what remained unknown. The tension in the apartment grew like a silent storm. Claire found herself avoiding the hallway, unwilling to confront the mystery lurking just beyond the door. Yet Milo's behavior refused to relent. One evening, Claire came home to find Milo sitting rigidly at the base of the staircase, staring up as if waiting for something, or someone. She called his name softly, but he didn't move. His gaze was fixed on the top landing, ears perked forward. Claire's skin prickled with unease. What had Milo sensed? Was there more than just dust and forgotten memories in this place? Days passed, and Milo's strange behavior became harder to ignore. He refused to eat in the kitchen, choosing instead to nibble silently in the corner of the living room. He hissed at shadows no one else could see. And every night, the scratching continued at the wall, a slow, relentless sound that wore on Claire's nerves. She began to wonder if Milo's presence was less about companionship and more about warning, an alarm bell ringing from some unseen place. One afternoon, Claire invited her sister over, hoping for distraction. Her sister Laura was practical and direct, the kind of person who believed in facts and logic. When Claire told her about Milo's behavior, Laura smiled skeptically. "Maybe he just likes that spot," Laura said, reaching down to scratch Milo behind the ears. "Cats can be weird like that." But Milo flinched away, eyes narrowing, then returned to scratching at the wall with fresh urgency. Laura frowned. "Okay, that's a little odd." Claire realized she was beginning to doubt herself. Was she imagining things? Was grief twisting her perceptions? Or was Milo trying to break through a silence no one else could hear? The tension between doubt and belief tangled in her chest. Late one night, Claire found herself standing before the wall again, flashlight in hand, Milo circling her feet like a guardian. The apartment was wrapped in quiet, the hum of the city muted by distance. She pressed the light against the wall, tracing every crack, every uneven patch. Milo sat still, watching, eyes bright and alert. Claire knelt down and gently scraped away the loose plaster, revealing a narrow seam running vertically. Her fingers slid along the edge, heart hammering. Suddenly, the wall shifted. A panel loosened under her touch, swinging inward to reveal a dark, narrow passage. The air inside was stale and cold, carrying the faintest hint of something forgotten. Milo hesitated, then slipped inside without a sound. Claire swallowed hard and followed. The passage was tight and cramped, dust motes swirling in the beam of her flashlight. The walls pressed close, and the air smelled of mildew and old wood. At the end of the passage, a door, heavy, unyielding. Milo sat before it, tail twitching, eyes fixed on the lock. Claire reached out, her hand trembling as she tried the handle. It gave way with a soft creak. Inside was a room, small, windowless, filled with boxes and papers, the detritus of a life hidden away. Claire stepped inside, heart racing. She felt the weight of time pressing down, the secrets held in silence. Milo brushed past her, his fur glowing softly in the flashlight's beam. She picked up a stack of papers, dust motes rising in clouds. They were journals, pages filled with Evelyn's handwriting, stories of pain, hope, and loss. Claire's breath caught as she read a passage about a love lost too soon, a secret kept to protect those left behind. The room felt heavy with memory, the air thick with echoes. Claire sank to the floor, Milo curling into her lap. Tears slid down her cheeks, not just for Evelyn, but for herself, for the grief she carried, the solitude she thought would never end, for the fragile thread of connection that had brought her here. That night, Claire and Milo lay close, the weight of the hidden room between them. The cat's breathing was slow and steady, a tether in the darkness. Claire traced patterns on his fur, feeling the rough patches beneath her fingers. She realized that some wounds, like some stories, were never fully visible, but they could be held gently, without judgment. The tension that had tightened her chest began to loosen. Claire understood, in that quiet moment, that healing was not about forgetting. It was about making space for the past, for the pain, for the unexpected love found in a thin, meowing shadow. The first time Claire cracked the door open fully, the apartment felt different, as if the walls themselves had been holding their breath. The soft scrape of the old hinge was a sound she hadn't expected to hear after so many years of silence. It echoed like a whispered confession through the narrow passage, bouncing off the cold, faded wallpaper and into the corners of her chest. Milo slipped through the gap without hesitation, his paws landing silently on the dust-covered floor beyond. Claire stood frozen at the threshold, the stale air rising to meet her, a thick, suffocating mix of forgotten things. Old paper, damp wood, the faintest trace of perfume she couldn't place. The scent clung to her skin as if pulling her deeper into something that had waited too long. She took a cautious step inside, her eyes scanning the cramped room, lit only by the narrow beam of her flashlight. Boxes stacked unevenly along the walls, a folding chair folded and pushed against the far corner, yellowed papers spilling from a battered suitcase. This was Evelyn's sanctuary, a hidden world beneath the everyday life Claire thought she knew. Milo's tail flicked as he padded toward a small wooden box resting on a low table, worn smooth from years of handling. Claire's breath caught. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. The box was heavier than it looked, its carved edges rough under her fingertips, the faint scent of cedar rising as she lifted the lid. Inside, nestled among old letters and dried flowers, was a small bundle of photographs tied with a faded ribbon. Claire pulled them free, careful not to disturb the fragile threads that held Evelyn's story together. The photographs were sepia-toned, edges curling with age. Faces stared back at her, a young woman with bright eyes and a gentle smile, a man with a shadowed face and kind hands, children with messy hair and carefree grins. Each image was a shard of a life, fragmented but full of meaning. Claire sank down onto the floor, the wooden boards creaking beneath her weight. Milo settled beside her, his warmth a steady presence. She laid the photographs across her lap and let the silence stretch between them. A letter slipped from the bundle, fragile as a moth's wing. She unfolded it carefully, the ink faded but still legible. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer able to speak these words aloud. Please know that my love for you never faltered, even when the world seemed determined to keep us apart. I have hidden this room, not out of shame, but to protect you, to keep a part of us safe from those who would not understand. I hope one day you will find peace in these memories, and maybe, just maybe, forgiveness. Claire's fingers trembled as she read and reread the words. The pain in the handwriting, the love and fear woven through every line, it broke through the years and reached straight into her own heart. She looked down at Milo, who blinked slowly, his eyes soft and unblinking in the dim light. The cat nudged her hand with his head, a small grounding gesture that felt like a lifeline. The tears came then, quiet and relentless. They slid down her cheeks, warm and real, soaking into the threadbare rug beneath her. She hadn't cried like this in months, maybe years. It was a release she hadn't known she needed, a letting go of all the grief and loneliness that had piled up in the corners of her soul. Milo's purring grew louder, vibrating against her thigh. He curled closer, pressing his warm body into hers like a whispered promise. You are not alone. Claire closed her eyes and let herself be held by the moment, by the room filled with secrets, the faded photographs, the fragile letters, and the small, insistent presence of a cat who had come to save her in ways she hadn't yet understood. For hours, Claire sat in that hidden room, unraveling Evelyn's story piece by piece. The journals and letters revealed a woman who had loved fiercely but was forced to live quietly, a woman who hid parts of herself away not because of shame, but because the world was not yet ready. Claire saw herself in Evelyn's words, the same fear, the same longing, the same aching hope for something better. It was as if the past had reached out to touch her through time, a silent conversation between two women who had carried their pain alone. Milo never left her side. He prowled quietly, alert to every sound, every shift in the shadows. At one point, he stood before a small, battered suitcase, his nose twitching as he sniffed carefully. Claire watched as he pawed gently at the corner, then looked back at her as if urging her to investigate. She opened the suitcase and found more letters, carefully folded and yellowed with age. Among them was a map, hand-drawn with a small X marked near a spot labeled simply, Home. The discovery filled Claire with a strange mixture of hope and fear. The map was more than just a piece of paper. It was a key to something lost, a promise of closure, or maybe a new beginning. She folded the papers carefully and looked down at Milo, who sat with his tail curled around his paws, eyes bright with quiet understanding. It was then Claire realized something profound. Milo wasn't just a stray or a companion. He was a guardian of memory, a living thread linking past and present, pain and healing. That night, Claire lay awake, Milo curled against her chest. The small weight of him was grounding, a tactile reminder that she could carry her grief without breaking. She thought of Evelyn, of the love and loss etched in those yellowed letters, and felt a bittersweet kinship. Morning came slowly, washing the room in pale light. Claire dressed quietly, her mind made up. She would follow the map. She would seek out what Evelyn had hidden, not just in the world, but inside herself. The journey was small, but significant. She packed a bag with essentials, tucked the letters and photographs safely inside, and, with Milo on her heels, stepped out into the world beyond her apartment. The city moved around her, indifferent, but alive. She felt the weight of uncertainty, but also a spark of something new, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the past could lead her toward healing. Milo walked beside her, tail flicking gently, a steady presence in the shifting light. Days later, Claire found herself standing before an old house at the edge of the city, the place marked on the map as home. It was worn, with peeling paint and vines crawling over the porch, but there was something alive in its quiet resilience. She pushed open the gate, the hinges creaking like a whispered welcome. Milo darted inside, exploring the overgrown garden with eager paws. Claire stepped forward, feeling the weight of years lift just a little. Inside, she found remnants of Evelyn's life, faded photographs, a rocking chair by the window, a small collection of books with cracked spines. There was no grand revelation, no sudden catharsis, just the quiet presence of a life lived fully, fiercely, and sometimes painfully. Claire sat on the worn wooden floor, Milo resting his head on her knee. She felt the slow, steady pulse of healing begin to spread through her, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a storm. In the days that followed, Claire returned often to that house. Each visit was a step toward understanding, toward making peace with the shadows that had haunted her. Milo's presence was constant, sometimes a silent guardian, sometimes a playful companion, always a reminder that she was not alone. Their bond deepened in the simple acts of shared time, the brush of fur against skin, the rhythmic rise and fall of breath, the quiet moments of trust. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft gold, Claire sat on the porch with Milo curled in her lap. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the hidden room, the letters, the map, and the cat who had led her through it all. Milo blinked slowly, his gaze steady and full of knowing. Claire smiled softly, the tightness in her chest loosening. For the first time in a long time, she felt whole. The cat's meow, the one that had started it all, was no longer a call for help or a warning. It was a quiet song of homecoming. The apartment felt different when Claire returned from the old house. Quieter, somehow lighter, even though the faded walls were still the same, and the city hummed with its usual noise beyond the window panes. It wasn't the kind of change you could see right away, but something had shifted deep inside her. A subtle rearrangement of hope and grief, like a fragile thread being rewoven into a tapestry she thought was forever torn. Milo padded beside her, calm and steady, no longer the restless spirit clawing at the walls, but a patient presence that seemed to understand the weight she carried and the space she'd begun to reclaim. Claire set down the small bag with Evelyn's letters and photographs on the kitchen table. She ran her fingers over the stack, hesitant, as if afraid to disturb the delicate balance of the past and present. Yet she also knew these were not just relics. They were keys. Keys to memory, to healing, to the parts of herself she'd long tried to ignore. She sank into the chair, Milo hopping up to curl on her lap with an effortless grace, his warm weight grounding her in the moment. The morning light poured through the window, casting soft shadows across the worn wooden floor. Claire breathed in the familiar scent of coffee brewing and the faint musk of Milo's fur, now tinged with the freshness of their outing to the old house. It was a scent of home, complex, layered, real. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to just be. The grief that had felt like a leaden weight over the months was still there, yes, but it no longer controlled her. Instead, it had become part of a larger story. A story where loss coexisted with tenderness, and loneliness made room for connection. Milo's gentle purring filled the quiet spaces, a steady rhythm that matched the slow, steady beat of her heart. The days unfolded in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Claire found herself drawn to the little routines that had once seemed mundane, but now carried new meaning. She made coffee with care, measuring the grounds just so, savoring the warm cup as it steamed between her hands. She watered the small cluster of plants by the windowsill, watching new green shoots stretch toward the light. And Milo settled into his role with quiet confidence. No longer skittish or anxious, he sought out Claire's company, curling into her lap during quiet afternoons or trailing her softly through the rooms, his paws whispering against the floorboards. One morning, she caught him pawing gently at the corner of the living room, the same wall that had once concealed the hidden passage. But this time, he stopped after a few scratches, turning his wide eyes toward her as if inviting her to acknowledge the past without fear. Claire smiled softly, reaching down to stroke the soft fur behind his ears. "You're braver than me," she whispered. Milo blinked slowly, the cat's version of a secret smile. Though the apartment felt warmer, more lived in, Claire's nights were still quiet and sometimes haunted by shadows. She'd wake occasionally, hearing the distant hum of the city or the soft scratch of Milo shifting beside her. The hidden room was no longer a place of mystery, but a sanctuary she visited in her mind, a silent space where Evelyn's story and her own intertwined. She kept the photographs and letters carefully stored in a small box, bringing them out only when the memories grew too heavy to carry alone. Each page, each faded inked word, was a reminder that pain was never something to conquer, but something to carry gently. Her thoughts often drifted to the past, to the moments she had missed, the love she had lost, the dreams left unspoken. But now, she also saw something else, the quiet strength that comes from surviving, from choosing to open oneself to life again. One afternoon, Claire met Laura for coffee. The cafe was bustling with afternoon patrons, the clink of cups and soft hum of conversation wrapping around them like a familiar song. Laura watched Claire carefully, noting the subtle changes, the softer gaze, the slight smile that lingered longer than before. "How are you, really?" Laura asked, her voice low. Claire took a sip of her drink, the warmth soothing her nerves. "I'm better. Still carrying a lot, but I'm starting to live with it instead of against it." Laura nodded thoughtfully. "It's good to hear. And Milo? He seems like a special little guy." Claire smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Milo saved me in ways I didn't expect. He was the key to everything." Back home, Milo greeted her at the door with his usual quiet enthusiasm, tail high and eyes bright. Claire dropped her bag and sank onto the couch, Milo immediately curling beside her, purring deep and content. She let her hand drift over his fur, feeling the soft roughness of the few patches where his coat was thinner, a reminder that he too carried stories she might never fully know. Her phone buzzed quietly on the coffee table, a message from a friend she hadn't spoken to in months. "Thinking of you. Want to catch up?" Claire stared at the screen for a long moment, the hesitation thick in her chest. Then she typed back slowly, "I'd like that." It was a small step, but a big one. Evenings became quieter, filled with soft light and gentle sounds. Claire found herself reading the journals from the hidden room again, but this time with a different perspective. Not just as a witness to Evelyn's pain, but as a participant in the ongoing story of survival and hope. Milo would settle on the windowsill, watching the street below with quiet intensity. Sometimes he meowed softly, a reminder that the past was never fully gone, but that it no longer had to control the present. Claire would glance over at him and smile, a shared understanding passing silently between them. The mystery of the hidden room remained, a layer of shadow beneath the light, but it no longer felt like a burden. Claire accepted that some things would stay unexplained, that not every question had a neat answer. The weight of grief wasn't something to be fixed or erased, but something to carry with kindness. Her days were filled with small victories, a laugh shared with a friend, the gentle brush of Milo's whiskers against her hand, the sunlight spilling through the curtains in the morning. She learned to sit with the quiet, to let the pain and hope coexist without forcing one to overshadow the other. One afternoon, while tidying the living room, Claire found a small scrap of paper tucked between the pages of one of Evelyn's journals. It was a list of names, dates, places, a map of connections and memories. She traced the words with her fingers, feeling a strange kinship with the woman who had written them decades ago. For the first time, Claire allowed herself to imagine a future where loss was part of the landscape, but not the whole story. Milo padded up beside her, nudging her hand with his nose. "Thank you," she whispered. The apartment no longer felt like a prison of memories, but a home filled with possibility. Claire woke with the dawn, Milo curled at her feet, the quiet rhythms of their lives unfolding like a slow, tender song. Sometimes, when the world outside felt too loud, she would sit with the photographs and letters, letting the stories wash over her like a balm. And Milo, always Milo, was there, steady, watchful, a living bridge between the past and the present. She knew there would be harder days ahead, days when the weight of everything pressed down again, threatening to unravel the fragile peace she'd found. But she also knew she was no longer alone, that the story of Evelyn, of Milo, and of herself was still being written, and that was enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, Claire stood by the window with Milo in her arms. The city stretched out before them, complex, imperfect, alive. She breathed deeply, feeling the pulse of life around her and within her. And in that moment, she understood something simple and profound. Home was not a place to escape from, but a place to return to. Claire had always believed that endings were definitive, a sharp line drawn in the sand, a door closed firmly behind you. But in the weeks since she'd stepped into Evelyn's hidden room, and then into the old house marked on that fragile map, she was learning otherwise. Endings were just beginnings with a different shape, quieter maybe, but no less important. The apartment was quiet that morning. Sunlight filtered through the half-open blinds, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. Milo was stretched out on the windowsill, eyes half closed, his chest rising and falling with a calm rhythm that grounded Claire's own restless heartbeat. She sat cross-legged on the floor, the small wooden box of letters and photographs beside her. She'd read them so many times now, the paper fragile beneath her fingertips, the ink faded but still alive with Evelyn's voice. Today, something felt different, an almost imperceptible shift in the air. Claire's fingers brushed over the lid of the box and then paused, lingering over a thin envelope she hadn't noticed before. It was tucked beneath the last letter, almost hidden from sight. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, edges yellowed but smooth, sealed with a delicate wax imprint, an ornate design she didn't recognize. Her breath hitched. Carefully, reverently, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. "To whoever finds this," it began, "if you have come this far, it means you have opened the doors I once locked. It means you are brave enough to look into the shadows and strong enough to carry what you find there. There is one last thing I must share, one truth I never dared say aloud. When I hid away this room and sealed my past in letters and photographs, I did so to protect you, to protect myself. But the secret I carried was heavier than I can bear. I was not alone in this. There was someone else, someone whose love was both a balm and a wound. If you listen carefully, you might hear their voice in the spaces between the words. Please, hold them gently." Evelyn Clare's hands trembled as she folded the letter back into its envelope. She looked up at Milo, who was now sitting attentively, eyes wide and alert, as if he too sensed the weight of this revelation. There was more to the story, something Evelyn hadn't fully revealed, a presence, a memory, an unfinished thread waiting to be pulled. The past was not finished with her yet. That afternoon, Claire found herself walking through the city streets, the letter heavy in her coat pocket. Milo trotted beside her, weaving through her legs an ever-present shadow. She was drawn back to the old house, the place Evelyn had called home. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. The garden had grown wild, vines twisting up the crumbling walls, petals scattered like forgotten memories on the ground. Claire pushed open the creaking gate and stepped inside. Her eyes caught a glimmer beneath a gnarled tree, something half buried in the dirt. Kneeling down, she brushed away the leaves and uncovered a small metal box, rusted but intact. Her fingers worked the latch open, revealing a collection of letters tied with a faded ribbon, photographs, and a thin, leather-bound journal. Her pulse quickened. This was the final piece, the gift Evelyn had left behind. The journal was brittle with age, pages yellowed and edges curled. Claire opened it carefully, the words written in a neat, practiced hand. It was someone else's voice, a man's. I never thought I'd find the courage to write these words. But Evelyn was my world, even when we had to hide it from the world. She was the light in my darkest days. We dreamed of a future that never came. If you are reading this, know that love does not end with absence. It lingers in every corner, every breath. Hold her memory gently. And maybe, one day, you will find peace in the story we began. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. She traced the faded ink as if touching the man's soul across time. She felt the weight of his love, raw and aching, and the impossible hope he had carried. Milo nudged the journal gently with his nose, as if urging her to keep going, to keep believing. Claire closed the book and looked out at the tangled garden, the overgrown paths that once were walked by two people who loved fiercely, quietly, and painfully. The story wasn't just Evelyn's. It was a story of connection, resilience, and the courage to be seen. That night, back in her apartment, Claire sat on the floor, the journal open before her, and Milo curled beside her. The soft purring was a steady rhythm beneath the weight of history and hope. She realized that Milo had not only guided her through the past, but had become a part of her own story, a guardian of memory, a companion of healing. She reached out and stroked his fur, warm and real beneath her fingers. "Thank you," she whispered into the quiet. Milo blinked slowly, the cat's silent acknowledgement of a bond deeper than words. In the days that followed, Claire made a choice. She contacted the small LQB Plus archive in the city, a place dedicated to preserving stories like Evelyn's and her lovers. She donated the letters, photographs, and journals, ensuring that their love would not be lost to time. The act was both a farewell and a beginning. She felt lighter, unburdened, as if setting down a weight she had carried alone for too long. Milo adapted easily to the new rhythm. He was more open now, curling in unexpected places, sometimes sitting by the window watching the world with quiet curiosity. Claire found herself smiling more, laughing sometimes, and reconnecting with old friends she had drifted from. The past was still there, a thread woven into the fabric of her life, but it no longer defined her. One afternoon, while walking in the park, Claire noticed a small animal shelter hosting an adoption event. Milo trotted ahead, tail high, weaving through the crowd. A tiny tabby kitten caught Claire's eye, a scrappy little thing with wide, curious eyes and a cautious paw. The shelter volunteer smiled knowingly. "She's a little shy, but she's got a fierce heart." Claire knelt down, letting the kitten approach at her own pace. Milo watched from a distance, eyes bright and alert. Claire felt a tug in her chest, a hope for the future, a chance to create new stories. Back home, the kitten curled up next to Milo on the couch, both of them settling into a tentative truce. Claire watched them, feeling a quiet gratitude swell inside her. Milo had been the key that unlocked the past, and now this small new life was a symbol of moving forward, of love, in all its messy, imperfect, beautiful forms. That night, Claire journaled quietly by the window, the city lights twinkling below. She wrote about the hidden rooms in our hearts, the stories we carry, and the unexpected gifts that find us when we're ready. Milo stretched lazily on the floor, the kitten softly purring beside him. Claire smiled softly, closing her journal. The past had given her a final gift, the courage to love again. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by fur and memories, she felt whole. Claire sat by the window, the last light of dusk painting the city in a soft, forgiving glow. Outside, the world kept turning. People rushing home, street lights flickering on one by one, and somewhere nearby, a cat meowing softly into the twilight. Milo and the little tabby kitten, now named Wren, curled together on the windowsill, a quiet island of warmth amid the city's restless pulse. She watched them, her heart full, feeling the strange and beautiful ache of survival, memory, and hope all mingling in her chest. For so long, Claire had believed that grief was a weight to carry alone, a silent burden that could only be borne in solitude. But now, sitting here with Milo and Wren, she understood that grief was also a bridge, a way to connect us to what we've lost and to what remains. The hidden room, the faded photographs, Evelyn's letters, the forgotten journal of a love silenced by fear. They were not just fragments of the past. They were threads that wove through Claire's life and into the present, shaping her in ways she hadn't expected. Loss, she realized, doesn't ask for permission. It comes suddenly, rearranging the furniture of our souls. But love, real, stubborn love, lingers. It seeps into cracks and corners, settles softly like dust motes in a shaft of sunlight. Claire's journey with Milo had begun in pain, a desperate clawing at the walls of her loneliness. But it had become something more. A slow dance of trust, understanding, and quiet companionship. Milo wasn't just a cat. He was a living story, a guardian of memory, a mirror reflecting her own need to be seen and to heal. And Wren, the tiny, fierce kitten, was a symbol of renewal. of small, trembling hope, of new stories yet to be told. The apartment was no longer just a place to live, it was a sanctuary, a space where the past was honored but not imprisoned by it. Claire had learned to sit with uncertainty, to embrace the messy, complicated truths of life. There would always be shadows, of love lost, of secrets kept, of times that couldn't be changed. But there was also light, laughter, and the soft press of a cat's paw against skin in the dark. She traced Milo's whiskers absently, feeling the roughness beneath her fingertips. The faint scars on his ears told stories she might never know. Stories of survival, protection, and fierce courage. And in these stories, Claire found herself. The city beyond the window was vast, unyielding, and full of stories like hers. Stories of people who had loved and lost, who had hidden parts of themselves away, who had finally found the strength to open the doors. Maybe that was the real gift of Milo and Evelyn's hidden room, the reminder that none of us are truly alone in our grief, no matter how silent it feels. Love leaves traces, small, tender marks that can't be erased. Claire thought back to the moment she had first heard Milo's insistent meowing, to the trembling thrill of discovery as the hidden room unfolded like a secret flower. She thought of Evelyn and her lover, their courage and their pain, their stolen moments and quiet rebellions. She thought of her own loneliness, the heavy silence of her apartment before Milo arrived, the tentative steps toward healing. And she knew, with a quiet certainty, that the story was never really about finding closure. It was about learning to carry the past with grace, to let love transform the cracks, and to keep moving forward even when the future is uncertain. Milo stirred beside her, eyes bright and full of life. Wren stretched luxuriously, her tiny paws kneading the soft fabric of the curtain. Claire smiled, feeling the weight of years lift from her shoulders, not because pain was gone, but because she had found a way to live with it. She reached for her phone, fingers hovering over the screen. A message from Laura popped up. "How are you today?" Claire typed back slowly, "I'm finding my way." Because that was the truth. The story of Claire and Milo is not unique. It's the story of so many, of unexpected companions, hidden rooms, and the quiet bravery it takes to keep loving. It's a story about second chances and the messy, beautiful work of healing. If you've ever felt lost or broken, remember this: you are not alone. Sometimes a soft meow in the dark is the beginning of everything. Thank you for joining me in this story. If Claire and Milo's journey touched your heart, please like and comment below. What part resonated with you? Have you ever had a quiet companion who helped you find your way? And if you want to hear more stories like this, real, heartfelt, and full of life, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to get daily videos. Together, we'll explore the small, powerful moments that make us human, because every story matters, and every heart deserves to be heard.